Hey everyone, thanks for coming to the OLM Issue Triage meeting. Today is October 13th, 2022. And today we're just going to be going over and triaging some of the issues that are in the backlog for Ruckpack. We're also going to start taking a look at Depi as work has been progressing on that to a good degree. So making sure that we're integrating with the Depi project and all of that good stuff is a directive of OLM as a team. So we're going to be doing that as well. Before we get started, did anyone have any specific issues that they wanted to address before just kind of generically looking at the backlog that we have and trying to get into a healthy state? Give that like 5 seconds. Okay, awesome. Well, let's go ahead and start looking at the backlog. The stale issues that have been marked have gone down a lot from our last meeting, so that's pretty good. I think now let's just start from the bottom and kind of make our way up. If you want to follow along, I just went into the issues for Ruckpack and I made it so that the label is lifecycle stale. We have a bot that automatically goes through and marks issues as stale as they become that way. Stale issues are denoted by their age corresponding to their activity. So if no activity has been done in the last 60 days, an issue becomes stale. If a PR has been opened within 30 days, it becomes stale and it gets closed after another 30 days. So that is the current setup. If you want to know how that's set up, you can go into the workflows section and take a look at stale. It's just using GitHub stalebot and the configuration is all there. Depi also, I think, has that bot that recently got merged. Let's see if it did. Yep, it did right here. I think it uses the exact same configuration. So pretty good in that sense. Cool. And let's see here. I think there's one more thing I wanted to go over with regards to the bot, which is there, or it's not with regards to the bot, but when the bot merged, I created a query on that issue for triaging just issues in general that are new. So we'll probably also take a look at that today. And that query is going to be closed by me. And here, it's not showing up. Maybe I can just look for it in here. But these are pull requests. Is issue stale? Here we go. Cool. Yeah, in this PR, I made this query that we can click on to find all of the new issues. So if you want to find this filter, I will link it in chat. But basically, GitHub itself has a really good issue querying, I guess you can call it API. But if you go to this little issues tab right here, you'll be able to kind of write out your custom queries, and they have their own like little querying language. Here you can see we're looking for is open, has no milestone in the repo for operator framework / Ruckpack, and it's an issue. And so in that particular case, this has no milestone. So it's not in the backlog. Therefore, it's new and hasn't been triaged. I think that's what we're considering that. Aki, I think you opened this earlier today and mentioned, I think Tim mentioned that there is a bit of an oversight that we had with a recent change regarding adding the ability for image to configure the image registry for tests. Did you want to talk on this a little bit since you opened it?
Yes, just right. I use that filter, the test equal something before the make test E2E. So to filter the specific test, but it stopped working after that PR was merged. So every time I do all the tests executed, it took long time. So I looked at any changes in the make file, then that was the one. So E2E flags is added, and then if I don't specify anything, that insert the double quote in the command line, in the Ginkgo lines. So that may somehow take effect.
Gotcha.
Not to filter work.
So it looks like what you're saying is that right now you're saying that if you just specify it as empty, then it works, but otherwise it doesn't, right?
Right. By default, it's right. It is the double quote is a
Right.
default. So that if that is comes in, it doesn't work.
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah, I think this is something that we can pick up. Is there anyone in this call that would like to pick this up? It looks like a pretty small change, more easily testable, so low complexity kind of change. Anybody feeling up to it? Otherwise, I'll just go ahead and mark it as a good first issue and we can move on. Okay, I'll go ahead and mark it as a good first issue, and I might end up picking this up, but in the meantime, I think that's good to leave around. Cool. And with that, we should be clear on this query. Yep, query marks as empty. And we are good to go on new issues. So let's go ahead and move on to the stale ones and just kind of moving up from the backlog. I think in general, a good aim is to get around 10 of these done, at least looking at 10 of them. And then moving on to Depi, I think sounds like a good action item from there. And yeah, so let's go ahead and do that. All right, so we have a flake for unpacking bundles with get sources. Looks like there's a bunch of context here. It got marked as stale. Let's take like 3 minutes to get up to date on the context here, because I'm just going to read through it because I haven't looked at this in a bit. And let's come back to it with that context. Aki, I think this sounds familiar, or this is striking a little bit of a chord with me with what you did recently. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Right. Yes. So I created PR to put the Git repository in the cluster for the testing purpose. So it's only work with the SSH protocol, I think. So it is not fully functional, but it is enough to test the bundle in a Git repository. So
cool.
I just put the one test case because people is comfortable with this. So I just put one. But if this is better, so I can convert all the Git repository source testing to use that local one.
That sounds like a good plan to me. Just looking at this, it sounds like what we were looking for when we were talking about this is creating a local Git server that would enable us to do this. I think based off of my reading here, you're creating a cluster. You're creating a GitHub server on the cluster instead, if I'm understanding that right.
Right.
And so as a result, we can totally just leverage that and convert over the tests. So I think I'm going to update this this issue here and make it so that we are keeping track of that.
Okay.
One thing
so
that
I've done a little bit of stuff related to this recently. So I can confirm that you can pass a local file, which works, but it depends on what we're trying to test. The main issue with setting up a local server, like if you were to be running Git daemon, that would work, but it would not be able to test various forms of auth, for instance. And you can't test that with the files. So, I mean, setting up a real Git server on cluster is probably the best way to test all the different pieces of this.
Yeah, I agree. Any other thoughts on this before I just go ahead and mark what we just talked about in this issue and mark it as not stale anymore? Cool. I'm gonna go ahead and do that. So just give me like 2 minutes to type that out. Cool. I think we are good in that sense. We have the backlog milestone. Cool. Yep. So let's move on to the next one. I'm also going to close out all of these things that we have to the right. Cool. Introduce framework for allowing emitting Prometheus metrics from the plane provisioner. I think Onig opened this quite a while ago. Let's go ahead and open that up. He even had a PR for it, and I think that PR is marked as frozen as well. So let's take a look at that. So, or I think we closed it. Introduce framework for emitting metrics from the plane provisioner. And I think that the bot might have closed this. Oh no, we're already closing it. Closing it until we're ready to do this work. Okay, yeah, so we closed this PR until we're ready to reprioritize this work. It's super out of date, and it eventually became rotten, so we closed it. Rotten is indicated by a PR that has become more than stale, so a PR that's been open for 60 days with no activity. We just went ahead and preemptively closed this, I think 3 days before or something like that. It would have become rotten and gotten automatically closed, but regardless of that, we have this closed now PR that ties back to this, which is allowing us to emit Prometheus metrics from the provisioners. This one is specifically tied to the plane provisioner. And it looks like we talked about this during a previous working group. So let's catch up on the context here and see how we want to proceed. So let's give it 1 second. Okay, it sounded like when we talked about this, at least from this comment from Tim on May 5th, I don't think we've looked at it since really, but it sounds like what we want to do with this is make it so that we are focusing on creating metrics sooner rather than later. I believe CDashR, that stands for controller runtime, I think. Not entirely familiar with that annotation.
That's always what we mean.
Okay, cool. Anyway, so with that, we probably want to take a look at this again soon. It's been quite some time, and as a team, we're moving, or at least the OLM team is moving towards focusing efforts on Depi, so we can kind of leverage some of the upstream resources here namely just like the goodwill of the team to kind of take a look at this. But I think this is some good work that we can come back to now that kind of Ruckpack work we've gotten some of the more important work out of the way. I think this is something that would be good to come back to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark this as no longer stale, and leave a comment saying that we should come back to this soon. And I think it has a PR attached to it. It does. So it'll be a matter of taking a look at that PR, rebasing it against the current state of the system, and evaluating how we want to proceed with that in mind. So I'm just going to update this to contain that context. Cool. I'm going to mark this as no longer stale. Keep it in the backlog. It may make sense for us to have, is there like a candidate for next milestone? I think this is something that would be good to get into whatever the next milestone is. Anyone thinking of a operator
Priority
framework?
Noon is a good one.
Yeah, that works. We could take a look at that. Let's do that real quick. Oh, it's both. That's funny. Okay, cool. That looks triaged to me. So I'm gonna leave that there. Move on. Any questions on this before moving on? Give that like 2 seconds. Okay, cool. So add pprof profiling to the plain provisioner. That feels like a like something that's intended to make you stutter. Anyway, I think you opened this up a while ago, and we considered it being relatively trivial to implement. That's why we marked it as good first issue. It's become stale since when we do get to this, it'll be worth assessing the value. Brings to our customer in the context of blah, 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 has been a source of test failure. Collect profile pods. Really, so if we do want something engineering ease. Okay, so it looks like when we do want to implement this, we want to implement it with the ability to disable it. I think when we initially introduced this issue, we talked about it and we thought that it was a pretty easy win, some low-hanging fruit we could get. Do we still feel that way? I'm not sure if Tim is here. Yeah, Tim, do you want to talk on this a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, still seems like a quick win here. There's probably still some functionality missing from Ruckpack before switching gears to any observability issues. There is a way to interweave those. I don't know if it's on my immediate roadmap.
Okay, gotcha. I'm gonna mark this as not stale. And you're mentioning that since it's not on the immediate roadmap, I don't think we need to freeze it. We can leave it as long-term. Just leave an update here. Oh, you literally removed it this second. I was about to ask, Catherine, if you still wanted to be assigned to this. Cool, looks like no is the answer. So I'm gonna go ahead and update this. Just say that we want to get to this. It's a pretty low hanging fruit, but in terms of priorities, we're not focusing on it right this second. Cool. Let's move on. Introduce a minimal set of conformance tests for Ruckpack provisioners. I think you were talking about this literally the other day. In fact, with that issue we were looking at earlier, Tim, this pull request, I think you mentioned it while I was with this issue. Well, you were saying, wondering whether an integration test would have caught this. Sounds like one thing that may make sense is for us to, as a team, kind of evaluate all the different testing approaches we want to do and implement. Because we have E2E tests right now, and I think it generally across the products, we have E2E tests and unit tests pretty solid. And then whatever additional tests we want, we should consider what those are and how we go about doing this. Because I'm not quite sure, at least on for myself. So that is something to consider. But let's go ahead and take a look at the actual issue itself. Okay, pretty bare bones issue. Introduce a minimal set of basic, straightforward conformance tests that can be used to validate Ruckpack provisioners down the line. Tim, I'm going to tag you in this, asking if you can get this to be a bit more workable state so that we can actually do something with it, because I don't quite know what those would look like. Do you have some maybe like ideas in mind? Just hovering your name. Any ideas in mind in terms of what you would want here? Maybe some deliverables that we can get out of this issue, make it a bit more actionable.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel free to tag me. I'll try and get back to it, flesh it out.
Okay, cool. Cool. This is something that I think we've gone back and forth on. I think there might have been another one somewhere. Maybe we closed it. There was another one of these issues, but for Operator Hub as well. I think Artifact Hub is a bit different. I've never actually interacted with it explicitly, but it would give the project some more visibility in the community in general as a way to find, install, and publish Kubernetes packages. Might be something that's interesting to integrate with, since we kind of do those things. I think OLM is on here too. Yeah, OLM is on here. If only by the community. I don't know if we own these or not. I don't think we do. Interesting. Anyway, what are our thoughts here? I mean, immediate gut reaction is this isn't something that we need to do immediately, or anytime soon, really. And I think it's probably worth a design discussion in terms of like if we even want to do this, and if we do, what value does it provide? Could be that I'm just overthinking it though, and we don't actually want to do that. I do notice that this mentions Helm chart and Git repository that deploys CRD's default plain v1 provisioner. I'm assuming that's just an antiquated looking at the, this is before the plain provisioner was called v0, I think. Anyway, validation webhooks, etc. So basically just being able to deploy via artifact hub. I think it could help expand the base of Ruckpack users, which is what I was saying there. Then we closed out.
Yeah, I think we just close this, Tyler.
You think so?
Unless somebody
You don't-
wants it. Yeah.
I mean, there's no explicit need for it. I think it just gives some more visibility in the project. But yeah, I mean, if we have like no interest in it, I'll just go ahead and close it. It's a good point. Cool. And support for opting out of specific CRD validation checks. I don't know if this is something that we really care about too much, mainly because we want to make it opt-in anyway. And it sounds like in general, we're trying to phase out the CRD validator as a concept, maybe for something more in depth. I'd be fine with keeping this open, although I don't know the value it provides in the current state of the CRD validator. And I think this is a follow-up from the initial from another PR. I think this is a follow-up from that. Yeah. It is indeed. So let's see. I'm gonna leave this open for now. Remove these two labels and move it into lifecycle frozen until we kind of decide what we want to do with that component of the CRD validator in general. I think you had a hand raised, Alex. I just noticed that you could do that in here.
Well, I was just gonna ask if I think in general we're thinking about moving away from the CRD validator. So if we're doing that, maybe I don't know if we're tracking that somewhere else, and if we are, it might make sense to choose to close this in favor of that one and just comment that like, hey, one option was like opting out of CRD validation, but
that's not a bad idea. And just to push that even further, it might just be worth closing this and creating a discussion, because I think there's some value, and we've seen some like just messing around debugging. I think Joe had one Slack comment where the CRD validation component actually caught some potential rough edges or data loss scenarios. So there's clear value in it. It's just the operational considerations aren't worth the risk benefit. So I wonder if it's better. So I think, yeah, Tyler, I think we can close this. I wonder whether we should open a discussion around like moving this logic entry, etc. Basically a non-webhook implementation.
Okay, yeah, I'm fine with that. I think what I would like to do is open a new discussion for this. Call it what is the future of the CRD validator components? We've seen some value derived from the current webhook implementation of this. I guess they're spelled derived wrong. Deprived. There we go. Webhook implementation of this component. However, there are some operational costs that were not quite willing to pay along with it. One potential solution to this is instead doing this entry without any additional webhooks. I think there was one other one, which is like make CRD validation optional or opt in maybe. I think it was this one. Yeah, we talked about this a little bit. I'm just gonna mark this here. Cool. That looks good to me. Category. Let's do questions, Q&A. Cool. So we will leave that there and go ahead and close this issue with that in mind. I think it should automatically tie. Does not look like it did. So I'm gonna go ahead and tie that here. Oh, this is the wrong one. I closed out the wrong one. Let's see. That is a old PR. See if I can find it again. Here we go. All right. So yeah, let's go ahead and close this out in that case. Cool. All right, any additional thoughts there before moving on? Let's try and shoot for maybe 3 more, and then we'll move on to Depi. I think that should be doable. Metrics framework for tracking test pass CI, test fail / pass CI failure rates. Okay, interesting. Metrics that outline CI pass fail rates over time to avoid getting the same situations with E2E suites. Yeah, so this is a thing that we saw in the OLM project where we would have some flakes that would get that would be hard to track over time. And so what this would allow us to do is kind of grab artifacts and see the health of our test suite over time as we kind of interact with those flakes. I can't think of anything off the shelf that we could do with this, but it is an interesting problem to try to solve. Definitely not important in the immediate term, but nice to have for sure. So I'm just gonna mark this as frozen since this isn't something that, well, it doesn't have to be frozen. I think it can just stay in the long term and just kind of let it sit for a while until somebody wants to come back to it. It may be worth, I mean, this is super old. This may be worth reevaluating this issue and updating it with some better context of what we would actually want here, or we can keep it open. I'll leave that up to to you, Tim, if you want to do that. But for now, I'm just going to move on from this issue unless you have any other comments. All right. Revisit decision to use finalizers to manage bundle storage. I think bundle storage has changed since this was probably open. I'm not quite sure. I'm just gonna go ahead and read through it real quick.
I think you're right, Tyler.
Okay, cool. I'm still gonna read through it, just make sure we're fine to close this out, but I think it probably is no longer relevant. Yeah, I think we're good to close this. Tim, do you agree? Anybody else agree? Aki or other maintainers?
All right, maybe we have to poke at the code, but
Sure.
I want to say so this is definitely before HTTP server storage, right?
Mm-hmm.
We might still use, God, we might still use finalizers. It's been a while.
Yeah, I think we are still using it, I think.
If that's true, we should definitely keep this keep this open, because I still think there's some open questions around that design. But hey, it's worked well so far, so maybe not.
Yeah, let's trying to think about the best way to handle this. I think what would probably make sense is for us to do a dive into the code, or whoever is going to pick up this issue to do a dive into the code and evaluate kind of what we even want to do about this. Because revisit decision kind of implies, hey, let's take a look at it again and make sure that it still makes sense. From that perspective, I think we have everything here that we need to actually execute on this. So I'm just going to leave a comment saying to whoever picks this up that I think the context is good here. And if there's any additional questions that we have, just reach out to the Bruckpack maintainers group and we can answer any questions from there. Obviously, I think probably one of us in this call is going to work on it, but just keep that in mind in case somebody else wants to contribute externally. Okay, can we prove design of the storage interface? Good question, Joe. Think that we probably just mark this as unstale and leave it as is. I think it's actionable enough and probably so relevant. At least looking at, I think the interface is the same. Well, now we have an HTTP handler and a URL4. So I guess it's changed a little bit since then. Still have the delete though. We have store and we have delete. We don't have load anymore. Or yeah, we do. We have a loader and a storer. Storage is a loader and a storer. I see. Okay, I'm getting it now. So we have load, store, delete in URL4. Cool. I haven't looked at this interface in a bit, but let's see what he was proposing. Okay, so maybe potentially adding a reap method to the interface. Revisit 309, which is the decision to make finalizers, and drop our use of finalizers. However, certain implementations of reap could easily be costly.
I mean, there's like a bunch of issues with the storage layer, or rather a bunch of potential issues. Like there is no persistency. So I don't know if we need to, I mean, I would just keep this open personally.
I know, yeah, I was gonna keep it open. I was just trying to see if I can add any additional context. It looks like we've changed since then. The storage interface has changed a little bit to have an HTTP handler as well as the URL for. But I think we just mark it as non-stale and move on.
Yeah, I mean, that reap is kind of interesting. Not too sure.
Cool. I think that leaves us at a good spot. Going back to this, we cut down on probably a little bit over half of those issues that were marked as stale, so that's good. I think we closed out 1 or 2 as well. We were at a point we were at 80 issues, so closing it down from 67 is pretty good in terms of the growth of issues as well as the stale ones we have. So that's pretty good. Also, we're getting kind of working through the backlog as it is and kind of making it a bit more actionable, which is good to see. So let's go ahead and take a brief look at Depi just so we get in the habit of doing this. Since I think that's probably the future of the Depi project and this meeting as well. It's just kind of aggregating the two together, at least in the short term. So let's open this up. Cool. So we have 3 issues open here. One is stale, which is create the Depi controller. I think this is from when we originally made, this is day after my birthday. Funny. I think this is when we originally made the repo. So I don't know, Depi folks, do you have any thoughts here about how we want to organize this?
I think this one we can probably close.
It doesn't feel relevant anymore considering a lot of the design work we're doing on the side. I mean, obviously we're going to have to create a Depi controller, but I think that we've
not
broken that.
necessarily. That was one of the questions that we've been talking about in the upstream is like, or in the Slack channel is what if it's not a controller? Like, what if it's just a library that can be pulled in and used? So, yeah, I don't know. I think it's kind of stale, and maybe we just close this for now, and we can always reopen it if we change our minds.
Is there a runtime component in this picture, Catherine? Outside of like, oh, we have some library, we might stick a CLI in front of it, but there's still a runtime component. Is that still in the plan?
So I'm not sure if that'll be in the core.
No, I see what you're saying. Let's just say we're talking about a monolith here, and we can figure out.
Yeah, I mean, if
later.
it's in a monolith, then yeah, maybe. But it wouldn't just be sort of generic. It would it would be basically that active resolution controller that Tyler's working on.
Okay, gotcha. Thanks.
Okay, cool. And with that, are these actionable is probably my first question. So feature request. Manual installs from 4 manual upgrades based on these are APIs that are designed to automatically approve the first installation. And then you mentioned another issue. Let's see here. Oh, and this is the feature request. We close this as the root issue will not be addressed in the existing APIs, but it created an issue against the Depi repository. Okay, I think with the two of these things together, it should be actionable enough. I don't know, I don't want to speak too much for the Depi maintainers because I don't work too closely with Depi as a project, but obviously I want to give you guys the agency to work on that as you will. I'm fine with just leaving this as is. I think it has some pretty good context with this other issue that kind of describes what they're looking for and that we can then convert into if we even want to do this at all with Depi.
Yeah, I think that sounds reasonable.
Cool.
It is interesting to see if like this is even applicable at the Depi layer. Like it seems like approval, or at least the way we sketched it out, it seems like approval belongs to the RUCPAC layer, despite having no roadmap items for implementing that. So there must be some sort of, I don't know, we'd probably need to dive in on this use case more before even throwing it in the long-term roadmap.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about this is that, like you said, RUCPAC doesn't have any kind of concept of approval, but also upgrades in general and like what to upgrade to, when to upgrade, when there is an upgrade available, there's kind of a dance between RUCPAC and Depi. I mean, there's probably a third component there that we are still thinking through. There's gonna be some kind of interactions between the two that kind of make this happen. So I think this is something that we can do. Whether or not it falls under Depi's domain, I think is a good question. I'll just go ahead and leave the issue as is, but mark it with that comment just so that whenever we do look at this again, we have that in mind. If that sounds good to you all.
Yeah, that seems pretty reasonable to me. I actually realize now, like, this is definitely not going to be implemented the Depi layer, right? It's going to be higher level than that.
I imagine this being at the operator API level.
Right? Exactly. Yeah.
But I hesitate to say operator API because it's something we really haven't thought through too much. But that's where I would imagine this happening is at that layer. But yeah, I'll mark it with this and try to be a little bit vague on the operator API side since that's still something that we want to design out. But just kind of convey that this probably isn't something that Depi should do. Let me do that, but I think one thing to keep in mind is like, do we want to close this or do we want to leave it open? Because we don't even have that operator API as a repo yet where we could open this against. So I don't want to lose this context since the other issue is closed.
Yeah, I would leave it open for now, but with a note that it's not necessarily relevant here.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just this came from somebody using OLM V0, and I was like, this is something we kind of need to consider, but it's not really a good spot to track it right now. There was, and it was on the upstream channel that I think the original request was made, and I was kind of, I mean, we could we could create the repo and then just move it there at some point, but the like you guys are saying, it's just here because this was the only repo for the new APIs that existed when we got this, and I figured it would be good to kind of share.
Yeah.
Is it maybe if we're going to stick them here for now, could we create a new label so we can find them easy?
Oh, I like that idea.
Yeah, we can do that. Let me write out this comment first and then I'll go ahead and do that.
Good idea.
It is quite the wrench in the plan thinking about how approval now gets handled or accommodated with Depi's APIs and behaviors. That seems like that's a potential source of complexity, but maybe there's some nice way of smoothing this out with like runtime constraints and some sort of API bridge. I'm thinking this is not on the roadmap for a while.
Yeah, I I agree with you. I don't know that. I don't know what this is going to necessarily look like yet. It seems like like off the cuff, it seems like you might want to consider like before creating the new, it seems like it has to be taken on at a higher level API, but I don't want to dig into that.
Yeah, no, it seems like a zero-sum game at times, because like we've tried to do this like exercise of like higher level, like what can actually be handled at the higher level. Because if you look at like a plain bundle for Ruckback, like deriving runtime checks, like health checks, is like impossible from a top level API perspective. So it's certainly something we should think about.
Yep. Nope. Totally agree. Total agreement.
Any idea on names for what you were talking about, Austin? Because I'm coming up at a loss.
Out of scope, higher level, maybe.
I think you can create a new label.
You can, but there's just so many labels that I hate to make another one.
Well, we
That's
can
a-
delete it as soon as we open up the other repo.
Sure. Sure, that's fair. There's a random button for colors. Very fun. Let's go with this beautiful green. I think green indicates something different. I'm actually gonna change that. I think those are all the issues though. Or I guess introduce release automation. We didn't see that yet. Oh, this is just doing the Go releaser stuff, right, Tim? I don't even think we know what exactly we want the release to be here.
I think we have an idea, but yeah, it's certainly early.
Yeah, I think this is fine to leave as is. I think it's pretty clear how to do this. I think the only thing I'm gonna do is oh, it's funny. You removing the why did it remove the stale status? That's interesting. I think maybe it removed the stale status because you removed your assignment, Catherine, which I think is interesting. And that it considered that an update, so it's no longer stale. No, that's fine. It's not a big deal. Just I guess for the future, just for everyone everyone's awareness, any activity is considered marking an issue is not stale anymore. I think it is funny that unassigning yourself counts. We could probably change that. I'd have to look at the configuration though. I'm just gonna mark this. Go ahead.
We could also put lifecycle frozen for things we don't want to go through that process.
Yeah, totally can. I think all the repos are set up to do that right now, so totally can. And it won't mark it as stale anymore as well. That also applies to PRs if we want to freeze those. I think we have a couple of frozen ones in Ruckpack. Okay. I'm just gonna mark this right now as I think it's fine as is. I'm just gonna leave a comment saying that we should consider what the actual release deliverable that we want to be, or the actual release artifact is that we want to be. Cool. I think with that, we are perfectly at time and we actually got through everything I wanted to do. Any other questions? Cool. In that case, feel free to drop. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.